This is the Adoptive Mom Podcast. Adoption may look different for each family, but we need solidarity from other crazy people who took this leap. And that is what we do here. We encourage, we build up, we share the wins and losses. We lean on each other, and we get through this together. Thanks for joining us. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Adoptive Mom Podcast, Season 1, Episode 9. I am Alex Fitton, and I've been having so much fun doing this podcast and bringing you stories and tips and encouragement from real-life characters in this adoption game. And I'm so glad you're here. I'm thankful for all the reviews, and I wanted to read a few of them just like I did last week. So Michelle Smittle, says, I've been listening to everyone I can find regarding foster and adoptive parenting, and this is my favorite by far. While no two stories are the same, the adoptive mom does a great job of exploring the unique experiences of each family and never shies away from the hard questions. As a foster and adoptive mom myself, this podcast has been so encouraging to me. I can't wait for more episodes. Thank you so much, Michelle. I love putting out new episodes, and I love that they're touching other people's lives. This person, it's AKLXI class. I don't know how you would say that, but she or he says, after the first episode, I've been hooked. The guests and stories are powerful, and Alex is very engaging. As an adoptive mom, I feel like I should be taking notes because it is one great nugget after the next. Thank you so much. And A. Yayak says, I have loved every episode. Keep them coming. So if you would like to have your review read aloud or be featured, then go over to iTunes and leave a review for me. It'll only take a few minutes, even if you just do a star review without the actual words portion of it. That really helps this podcast out, and I'm so grateful to read this feedback. So today, we get to hear from Annie Martin. She is an adoptive mom of 8 children. Like, none of them are biological. It's insane, but they're so awesome. And all of them are young and at home. So they're still in the actual throes of this crazy thing. And I have loved her story because they somehow just have this supernatural capacity to pray for and engage with other adoptive families and minister to them, even while their lives are seemingly on fire too. She and her husband, Waylon, are the directors of Grace Haven Ministries. You've heard me talk about this on the podcast. Me and Michelle went into more detail about this awesome ministry. They serve adoptive families by just putting their arms around them, helping them find the services they need, giving them counseling for free sometimes, and just encouraging them. And a lot of that encouragement comes directly from Annie herself. And she's just great. She's always there to let you vent. She can always take the real questions, the hard questions, and there is absolutely no judgment. And I love talking to her and Waylon. They're both just great. So today we're going to talk about some of those hard behaviors that we experience as adoptive families and how we have been blessed by God and how He uses other people in our lives to minister to us and to bless us. And it was just such an amazing conversation, and I'm so excited for you to hear it. So let's get right to it. My interview with Annie Martin. All right. Hey, everyone. Hey, Annie. How's it going?
Hi, Alex. I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. So I'm not sick anymore, but I was sick, so that's what the sultry voice is over here. I know that you've had some sickness in your family too, so bear with me. Okay, so yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself. How many kids you have, ages, name, stuff like that.
Okay, I will. My husband and I actually met years ago. Probably before you were born, way back in 2002, and we got married in 2003. We met online, which I think some people find scandalous, but we laugh and tell them it's our story when they say something like, "Oh, you met online," and then they don't know what else to say.
So interesting, mysterious.
It is. It is kind of interesting, and we talked for a long time before we actually decided to meet one another. But we met, and I mean, just instantly, we were already like best friends, and so we met. And, I feel like we immediately fell in love, and we were married 7 short months later, basically.
Wow.
And so we just had a very, very small engagement, very small courtship, and have been married since August of 2003. So we started our family. We actually wanted to start a family right away, and struggled with infertility for several years. And during our entire time of struggling with infertility, just kept asking God for a family. And Waylon was working in kind of a social work role with children through a local organization as a teacher to really hard preschoolers, like kids that it's hard to believe that a 3-year-old can be kicked out of preschool, but they can. And so he was working with like 3 and 4-year-olds that were really, really tough. And he was being drawn to foster because he was interacting a lot with DHS. Several of his kids had caseworkers, and just talking with them, hearing DHS workers say, these kids are hard to place. And so he was really being drawn and feeling that pull, and we were asking God for a family. And we both kind of came to an agreement that we wanted to start pursuing foster care. And DHS lost our paperwork several times.
That's
I
awesome.
know, like, super surprising. It took us like over a year to even be invited to our first training because they lost our paperwork.
Oh my goodness. Well, and hang on. So let's back up a little bit. You guys did not train through the call, right? Like this was pre-call in Northwest Arkansas, right?
Exactly. This was very pre-call.
Yeah.
I was going to say we actually had to seek out DHS ourselves.
Goodness, that's crazy. So you have, for everyone listening, you have like a whole bunch of kids.
Yes.
And I think we've already hinted that none of them are biological, which means that you are just a really crazy person, but you're a really awesome person. So you have 8 kids. Start from the top and work your way down. Who we got here?
Gavin is 16. Hannah is 15. And biologically, their brother Tevin is 12. And so we have the 3 of them. Chloe is 13. And Delilah and Shelby are twins, and they're 9, and they are biologically sisters. And then we have Truman, who's 6, and Hibben will be, as of this today taping, he'll be 3 on Thursday.
Wow. Oh, sweet Hibben. He and Grady are about the same age. I always forget that.
Yes, they are.
So, so that's 2 or 3 sibling groups. I always forget.
2 sibling groups of 3.
2 sibling groups of 3. So your standalones are Hibben and Chloe?
Hibben and Truman.
Truman, okay. I'm sorry.
Yes.
See, I even get it mixed up. I don't know how you keep it straight, but you're kind of a superwoman, so it doesn't surprise me.
Everybody gets it mixed up. And if you look at the kids, like, they all look alike. So you can't just go through and pick and say, man, I bet that one's... No, they all look alike. So, it's Hannah, Gavin, and Tevin, Chloe and the twins, and then Truman's, and then Hibben separately.
Wow. Okay, and then what was the year span that you got them? Like, Gavin was your first, or, his sibling group was your first, and Hibben was your last. How many years between placement was that?
We got Gavin in 2007, and he was our first placement. And then Hibben came to us. He was placed with us just a few weeks after birth in October of 2014.
Okay, so just not very long then.
Right.
For 8 kids, only 7 years from start to finish. Goodness. Okay, girl. So, all right, work us from the beginning of this story. You kind of started about it, just how you got into the foster care business and what, there's so much more to this story just about how you guys have been involved in the call. And I know you didn't start there, but you guys are kind of like really famous in the call community. So let's talk about that. Tell us your story.
Well, we started fostering in 2007, and we got Gavin, and then a week later Tevin came to us, and we fostered them, and for 6 months, I will not lie, I cried every night.
Wow.
I would just look at Waylon and I would say, I will be so glad when their mom gets her stuff together and these kids go home. I'm ready to have my life back, because we had been so alone for so long. And then suddenly there were these 2 kids who needed me constantly. And I was a little bit selfish back then. And I was not sure I was ready to be the mom that they needed. So for 6 months, really from April until September, I was just waiting for them to go home and for my life to return to normal. And this whole foster care thing had been fun. And then it was over, and I was going to move on to something new and maybe get a puppy.
Wow.
And in September, we received a phone call. Gavin had actually gone into the hospital because he was very sick. He had some asthma problems and had gone into the hospital and was there for a couple of days. While we were there, in the middle of dealing with him being very ill, called DHS to let them know. And I'm talking to the worker, and she said, okay, well, do you need me to send somebody to sit with him? And I was super confused. No, we've got this. I'm pretty good at sitting at the hospital. I can take care of him. And she was shocked that we were going to do that, and that we weren't asking for DHS to come and sit with him around the clock. And then she said, well, I've got some news. There's a home that's a group home that's opened up near where their mom is incarcerated. And we're going to send the 3 kids. We've been doing sibling visits with our sister, Hannah. We're going to send the 3 kids to live in that group home, probably like when he gets out of the hospital.
Wow.
And we were like shocked and a little bit devastated, and trying to deal with his illness and being in the hospital and getting this information. And like this ferocious mama bear just like came out inside of me. And I think it was something that I didn't even expect. But I was just like, no, these kids have never even had a Christmas. Like when I asked them what they wanted for Christmas, they were telling me, what is that? We don't know what that means.
Wow.
Do we get gifts? And Gavin was 6 at that point and was like super, excited about what this holiday season was going to hold for them. And so I made a plea with the area director at the time that he would give me a month to find a home, because the home that we lived in Rogers, was only big enough to hold us and the boys. It was 2 bedrooms. So Waylon and I had the master bedroom and the boys had the spare bedroom, but they were court ordered to be with their sister if there was an open home with openings. And so I got a quick delay of that while we immediately started searching for a home for all of us so that their sister could move in with us and we could keep them together and in a home with a mom and dad for Christmas, which was, I felt, of the utmost importance to us. And within a week, while he was in the hospital, actually, I had secured a new house, put all of the down payments and everything we needed on that rental, and prepared and started moving our family in, basically, from the hospital room. We then notified everybody, and he was hospitalized the very last week of September, and by November 1st, Hannah was moved in with us. So it was, we came through on our end, and were able to get them together, and really didn't know what the plan was at that point. We were in it for the long haul. We were expecting that we would keep them until they could go home, or whatever the ending of that story looked like. But we definitely wanted them to be together and just be in a home for Christmas. So we were very lucky that happened, and we continued to live in that house for about 18 months. And during that time, fostered just a couple of kids, but really felt God calling on our heart that we needed a bigger place. We ended up adopting Hannah and Gavin and Tevin in March of 2009, and continued to look for a home where we could actually expand our family even more, and really lucked into the house that we live in now. Moved in here on Memorial Day weekend, the last weekend in May of 2009, and DHS came out. I can remember our resource worker came out, and he was just the nicest man. Came and looked at our house because DHS has to approve that, yes, you've moved and it's a safe place for the kids. And then, and there's space for more kids. And so he came in and he looked and he, checked all of the things and said, well, you've got room for 8. We had actually at that moment had 5. We had our 3 that we had already adopted and then 2 that we were fostering. And he said, the last thing he said to us as he walked out the door was, just because you have room for 8 doesn't mean you have to take it right away. Just go slow because I don't want you to become overwhelmed. And I smiled and nodded at him, but I had already promised DHS that I would take the twins and Chloe because they had called me about 3 weeks before we moved and asked if we had room for them. And I told them that we were getting ready to move and that we would be happy to take them when we were done. So we left the meeting with him where he smiled at me and told me not to and drove all the way to Berryville and picked up Chloe, Delilah, and Shelby in the DHS parking lot of Carroll County in Berryville, Arkansas.
Awesome. Oh my gosh. So, and then we know that the other 2 came a little bit later. Do you have stats on how many, aside from your 8 that you have adopted, how many foster kids did you have?
Well, including our 8, we had 65 children that we fostered through we fostered for a little over 8 years. And so we had, and some of those were really only 24-hour, like they spent the night. We had a teen girl when we were living at the other house in Centerton who came, and I really felt like she would just bolt out the door. So I actually had her leave her bags and things in my room so that if she was going to leave, I would at least hear her grab this stuff. I had my door open and said, I'm going to just set your bags right here. If you need them, they'll be here all night. But I really thought she was gonna bolt, and so she didn't. We made it through that night, and DHS was able to pick her up the next day and got her into a group home that she was actually excited about. But I really didn't know if she was going to spend the night. So we had lots of cases from teenagers down to infants. We had an infant for 10 months that was with us, biologically related to my twins, and he moved on to a biological relative of another biological relative of his own. And
wow, I didn't know that actually.
We had actually had him since he was 3 weeks old. So,
oh wow,
yeah, we've experienced kind of the entire stretch of little ones all the way to teenagers. And, I feel like we have a place in our heart for every one of them.
Yeah. And so now you guys see why they're kind of famous in the cult community. They're kind of rock stars. And I think that I should preface all of this by saying that, for a long time, you and I had never actually met face to face, that you reached out to me on Facebook right after we got Clark. And I was like, please help me because I'm freaking out. and you messaged me and you were so nice. And I was about to just pull all of my hair out because I had no idea what I was doing. And I still was naive enough to think that like all the lovey feelings were just supposed to like happen. And I was like, what's wrong here? Nothing's happening. I don't even like this kid. And you were like, it's okay. I promise it's okay. And you've been able to help so many other people like that. And I think that part of that, you know, and you provided a nice segue just talking about that teen girl that you thought was going to bolt. But, you know, you've said that almost all of your children have pretty extreme behaviors, right?
That's true. Yes.
And I've always just been so impressed with you that you see, I know that, and I'm glad that you said that you cried every day for 6 months. And I remember you telling me that and making me feel so much better, because on the outside, it's so easy to look at you and be like, wow, you've got, you know, kids that have such extreme behaviors, and we can go into those a little bit if you don't mind. But you seem to handle it all in stride. And it took me getting to know you a little bit more to learn how you handle that. And a lot of it is just through prayer and through support of other people. And I really want us to get into what makes all that possible, because I've just been so impressed with how you handle it. So is that cool with you?
I think that's great. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So yeah, let's just talk about some of those extreme behaviors that you deal with, just to set the stage for how you handle it.
Oh gosh. Well, we've seen a lot of behaviors, from sexualized behaviors, where we have, kiddos, even teenagers in our home that have crossed lines and touched other kids. We actually had a moment like that a couple of years back and had to make a hotline call ourselves, and actually step through both the side of the victim and the side of the perpetrator and work through that with kiddos that we had in our home at the time. And, I can say that everything we've done, we have an amazing pastor and his wife who, would drop anything to come pray with us. While the child was actually taken to the police station and questioned, and I did not feel like I was even strong enough to go. And where my feet can't take me, God is always with us. And so our pastor actually accompanied Waylon and the child to the police station, and was just there for them while the child was questioned. And, I think the biggest thing for me is being transparent with others. When you have a situation like that, I can't go in saying nothing happened. No, nothing happened and we're fine and everything's fine. Because if you're not willing to say I need help, then nobody can stand with you. And you just have to stand alone. And I'm just not strong enough for that. We need our people standing with us. And it is hard to say, gosh, I've got a kiddo in counseling who's really struggling, or a child that, has had this whatever behavior. But, knowing that you've got people who are not going to criticize you, are not going to, question your parenting, and just love you through whatever situation, I think is super important. With Grace Haven, which is a great nonprofit that Waylon and I are working through now, to support adoptive families once the adoption is finalized, and up to adoption if people are have questions and all of that. We've met Tina and Randy Kucirik. We've met Rebecca Price and Angie Milner, and the team that we've built there. If I am scared or if I am concerned, I can turn to them and just say, guys, this horrible thing happened, and they're right there. We had a few months ago, our daughter Hannah struggles with. She's been diagnosed with cyclothymic disorder, which is similar to a bipolar disorder. It basically is a cycle that is mood swings up and down.
Okay.
And can make her very depressed, where she gets suicidal and has some self-harming behaviors. Can also make her get to like manic, homicidal stages almost. And she struggles a lot with that. And she had a really rough weekend. And we had asked her to be in her room some and kind of had to isolate her away from her brothers and sisters. And she has graduated now, praise Jesus, a day treatment facility where she was receiving like group therapies and school at the same time.
Yeah.
And she actually went in and reported to them about a year ago that we had locked her in a closet for the entire weekend. And so DHS had to come out and actually do a complete investigation. And
wow,
there aren't locks on any of our closet doors or anything like that. But the stress of those times, the stress of my kids being interviewed by DHS and what that brings out in them, not just, oh my gosh, this is happening, which is stressful enough, but then the feelings, because they're all from foster care. So
to say, that's not the first time that's happened to them. So
that this is a lead into something that has happened before and they were removed from their parents. The behaviors that then escalates it's just hard. And, we've walked through so many hard things, and I think I keep my positive outlook and have been able to have a positive outlook for it because we are so passionate about helping people who are in foster care, who are in adoption.
Right.
We worked with a call, I think, like you said, for the longest time. And now we are working with Grace Haven. And with every single, every time we hit one of those roadblocks, every time we hit a barrier, whether it's a child's behavior, whether it's a call from DHS that they're coming to investigate our home, I can look at those things and say, I really feel like God put us here because there's going to be a parent who is going through this and they need to know someone else has been through these steps.
Oh, yeah.
And knows those feelings, because it's hard to describe the feeling when you get next to another mom and you say, this has happened, and they can say, it happened to me too.
Well, and I think and I want to get into Grace Haven later, but I'm glad that you brought it up because I think that it wouldn't be possible. I mean, you were talking about Tina and Rebecca and Randy and all of those people, but I think that your transparency led the way into those relationships because you have been that. And I think that that's so important. You have been that transparent. You've been that shoulder to cry on for moms who just feel like they can't do it anymore. And you wouldn't be that if you weren't transparent. You wouldn't be that if you weren't able to have if you hadn't have walked through those things and had those experiences to share and been willing to share them, then, where you would be a great adoptive mom, but now you're so much more than that because you're able to be that resource. And so, we've talked about just some of those extreme behaviors, and just from knowing you, I know that you guys seemingly it feels like there's something going on constantly. You have a roller coaster between, porn, between attraction to some dangerous things, between some, the sexual behaviors that you talked about, between, fire starting and just all kinds of stuff. And it's just like, I constantly am just like, how does Annie do this? And the thing that continually comes to me as you're telling me about these things willingly, which is great. That's that transparency we were talking about. And the word prayer is just constantly on your mind, in your texts and out of your mouth, on the phone, and everything is just constantly talking about how you're praying about it. And I wish that that came more naturally to me. And I've been getting so much better kind of with you as an inspiration, but how, let's talk about that a little bit, but just about leaning on God for every little thing, because it feels like those walls should have come crashing in on you guys a long time ago, but they haven't. Why? Why is that?
Well, and I completely agree with you. It is prayer, and it is we have seen so many acts of God's love toward our family. I wish I could tell you about every single one of them. From the moment that we stepped into this house and knew that God handed it to us, not because he wanted Annie and Waylon to have this house, but because he wanted it to be used for something greater than anything Waylon or I could do. We had a church pull up here. I was actually very sick with pneumonia. It's been almost 2 years ago. It will be 2 years this Christmas. And the First Baptist Church of Rogers sent a team out a couple of days before with some goodies for our kids. And we didn't realize that they were coming, and kind of were having a tight Christmas anyway. And they just showed up with a bunch of wrapped gifts for our children. And so we were pleasantly surprised, and we were just like in awe of God's goodness. And 2 days later, or 3 days later, a man shows up on our doorstep and rings the doorbell. And I was literally sick in bed. I didn't realize that I had pneumonia, but I was very ill and just trying to get through the Christmas season. It was the day before Christmas Eve, so December 23rd. And just wanted to get my kids through Christmas before I went to see the doctor or anything. And the doorbell rings, and Waylon goes to answer the door. And a man is standing at our door and said, "Hi, I'm the pastor," and introduced himself, and, is talking with Waylon. And, "Did you get the gifts that we sent for your family?" And Waylon is saying, "Thank you." And, in his mind, just is really impressed that this pastor came to check on us. And the pastor hands him an envelope and a set of keys and said, "Well, we heard," gosh, I'm going to try not to cry.
Oh, girl, it's okay.
We heard that your family has been struggling because you have adopted or are in process of adopting 8 beautiful children, but you don't have a vehicle that'll get you 2 places together, and our church has purchased you a van."
Wow.
And they gave us the keys to the van and the bill of sale and a check for the taxes. They'd already called and had the taxes figured, and it was just blessed upon us. And it's just so funny because I feel like my husband, sometimes you forget how important that prayer is, and just affirming that God is going to give you something. And that year, seemingly insignificant, but not really, we had been contacted by a member of the Project Zero team, Michelle.
Love Project Zero.
We love them, yes.
Well, and Michelle is on the podcast too.
Oh, awesome. Yes. Well, she had reached out to us and said, "Hey, we know that you've adopted a couple of teenagers, and we've got some tickets to an Arkansas football game. And would you like to go?" And Waylon was just like, "Yes, this would be awesome." And he thought, man, Gavin and I could just have such a bonding moment, because Gavin had never been to a Razorback football game, and we certainly couldn't have afforded to take him. And so he was real excited. And then she called back and said, "Hey, we've got a couple more tickets." And so he was going to take a couple more of our kids. And he looked at me one day, because I was a little bit, I'm just going to say it, I was a little bit jealous. And he said, "One of these days, God is just going to allow us to have one of those, a booth, or, one of the enclosed spaces at the football game. We're going to get to watch the football game together, because, skybox, there we go." Anyway, he says, because that's the only way we could take all of our kids with their sensory needs, with Truman. My gosh, he's like Houdini. We haven't even got to talk about him yet, but he is like totally an escape artist. And so he's like, "This is the only way we could watch together, but I know God is going to do this for us." And he said, "I just feel it." And so we would talk in over the next few weeks, like, well, when God gives us that, then we're all going to go. We would tell the kids this, just affirming, like, God is so good to our family. When he does this, we'll all go to the football game. But this time it's going to be Hannah and Gavin. And like 2 days before the game, we receive another phone call from Michelle, and she says to us, there's this firm, it was a law firm in Little Rock, or right near Little Rock, who has a skybox that they aren't going to be using for the game, and they've donated it to Project Zero. Would your family like this skybox?
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
And so I looked at Waylon in this moment. Of course, we were like, yeah, this will be amazing. And so we took our kids and we went to this game, and it was amazing. And then I looked at Waylon and I said to him, honey, you've got to start saying when God gives us a van, not, make it, but you said it for this. And there was also another moment where we were just talking, and seemingly insignificant, but it's really not, about needing food for our kids, needing to be able to fill our freezer. And randomly we were called by somebody who brought food and filled our freezer, and talking about how God was going to do that. And I think having that confidence and just knowing and praying that, but not even just praying, but just saying, God's going to do this for us, because we can't do it by ourselves. And just being that affirmative to our kids, to ourselves, and just know that God's always got it. And, it may take time. It's not always in our time when we think it's going to come, but He never fails us. Never.
Yeah. Oh, so amazing. And you've been able to share that in so many different ways with hurting mamas and dads and whoever else, and prayed for them. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've gotten a text from you that's like, hey, Waylon and I just spent some time praying for your family. How, what's an update? How's it going? And I'm just always astounded. And I know I shouldn't be, because God's people are so amazing always, but I'm always just like, oh my gosh, what an encouragement that, that we were on your mind, and that you spent time on our family, because I think of it and I'm like, I don't know how she has time for anything outside of her own family. And, because of some, 8 kids is crazy enough just in and of itself. And on top of that, you have things like, children escaping out of nowhere and starting fires and just, running away and all those fun things that we deal with as adoptive parents and foster parents, and just, parents of kids that have been traumatized in general. And so you have still managed to give back. I think we've already established that. So you were working with the call for a long time, and you guys were trainers, and you didn't train us, but you were training a different group at the same weekend as ours. And so you were kind of across the hall, but again, I never actually saw you. And now you're working with Grace Haven, and I want you to tell us a little bit about that. Because you've always just been such a support. We've talked about that a lot in this interview, and that's essentially the heart of what Grace Haven is. And although you weren't the founder, you are super close to the founders. We've talked about them a little bit, Tina and Randy, and now you and your husband Waylon are kind of the directors of this amazing ministry. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. Well, Waylon and I, were foster parents for a long time. We talked about that earlier, and really knew that our foster parent journey was coming to an end. In Arkansas, they will allow you to have 8 kids. Not very many people get that crazy, but we did. And
the overachievers.
Oh, yeah, exactly. We're overachievers. So we got to that 8th child and knew that we were coming to an end in our foster parent journey, and really started feeling God just tug at our hearts about the adoption community and kind of what resources were out there for adoptive parents. And I started doing some research, and I really kind of got Waylon involved in doing some research, and we both just looked at not only Northwest Arkansas, but really nationwide, at what kind of resources were out there for families who adopt, and really found that there was a lack of resources, that there are very few organizations or groups out there that help support families after the ink is dry, let's say, on an adoption.
Yeah.
Most of the time you've got if you adopt internationally, you've got somebody who comes in a couple of times after the adoption and they just make sure, hey, everything's going great, wonderful. They nod their head and then they're gone. With foster care, you don't even have that. You have a great day. You go in front of the judge, you have an adoption, and then you're like, it's over.
Yeah. Oh,
and
yeah.
there's not anybody there to hold your hand anymore. So if when you were walking through, whether you were going through an agency, whether you were going through foster care, whatever, you kind of had somebody holding your hand through this whole process. And then suddenly you're like, where did they go? And so Waylon and I really started looking, and I actually went through a period of just really deep depression and kind of a loss of who I was and really what kind of mom I was, as I was grieving some of those things that normal, well, I don't know if normal's a word, but normal moms get to have. And I think that is, really hard for adoptive parents. And like, you see kids, prom is a prime example for me. That's a trigger. So when prom rolls around and I know my kids right now are just not able and capable, even though I have children old enough, to be able to experience those things. And those are things that as a mom, that I'm not experiencing. I grieve those moments. Mm-hmm. And went through a kind of a grieving process with some of the behaviors we were seeing with some of our kids that we had adopted much earlier, but now are hitting teenage years, and we're really missing out on some things, and just really went through a really deep depression, and we sort of isolated ourselves on purpose from church, from even our call group that we had been very close with, just really feeling lost. And a lot of that was me as I was battling some of those griefs and didn't really know where to turn. And as I didn't even realize at the time that I was majorly depressed. I actually became almost agoraphobic, and I really didn't leave my house for about 6 months unless I had to. And really just, I mean, it was super severe for a little while, just in being afraid that if I went out, somebody would ask me a question about one of the children, or that I wouldn't have an answer and I wouldn't know what to say, or that if I took the kids out, that they would behave inappropriately and people would look at me. And like, there was a really big gap and a big loss there for us. And when I came out of that, as I came out of that darkness, and we began getting back into church, we began going back to those, groups and trying to get ourselves back out there, trying to get me back out, realized that there wasn't support for families in adoption, and that there has to be. And so we, in going through this really hard time, met with Tina and Randy, after we basically wanted to just know where their hearts were, because we didn't want to step on their toes, but we felt like God was saying to Waylon and I that there had to be an organization for support of adoptive parents. And so we asked to meet with them. They were relative strangers to us. They were Facebook friends and not really any other interactions that we had. But we knew that they supported adoption, and we knew that that was part of their heart. And we wanted to see how we could work together, or how we could at least work and not interfere with whatever they were doing. We knew that they do great things and have a great heart. And so we met with them one afternoon and just sort of spilled our heart to them and told them kind of the things that God had laid on our hearts, what we wanted the organization to look like, the kind of support we wanted to give to families. And we left the meeting, both Tina and I, in tears, because it was, for her, just hearing what God had placed on their heart 10 years before, and us being able to mirror that to them and have that same image on our heart from God. And we just became fast friends. We both of the couples had the same goals. And within a very short period of time, like within 7 days, Rebecca Price, amazing counselor and social worker, who had worked with the Kasirics before, reached out to them and said she felt like her heart was being pulled to help adoptive families, and how could she help? And we sort of just came together and created this family out of this, the broken pieces that God had kind of laid out there. And we have forged along and, made a bunch of slow movements, but really impactful movements to help families and get our name out there. And just reaching out to families in crisis, families that are going through similar things, isolation, dealing with hospitalizations, dealing with for instance, I had a mom call me 2 weeks ago who just brought a child home from another country. And as I was speaking with her on the phone, she was just saying, I don't even have anybody in my area that understands or has ever adopted. And she kind of paused, and I said, and it's not what you thought it was going to be. He's been here less than 2 months. And she just started crying on the phone with me. And she said, I don't feel like there's anybody I can say, because everybody says, look at your beautiful child. Yeah. And I don't feel like there's anyone I can say to. I'm really having a hard time attaching to him. And I think that is definitely something that, that adoptive families struggle with, and people who are outside of adoption don't necessarily see that struggle with that attachment, that struggle with how does this new amazing creature fit into my family, and what does that look like?
Exactly. And people think that if it's hard, then it's not meant to be. And I think that a lot of people look at adoptive families like saints, like, oh, it's so great that you just have all this abundance of love in your heart, and that, this seems natural to you. And people don't realize that it's not natural. It's not, that's not the way God designed it. And it takes work and it takes struggle. And I mean, sometimes it's more natural or easier than others, but I think there's so much loneliness in that place, because people just want to see the pretty. They want to see the beautiful story and the touching moments and everything. But a lot of times people don't even see the need to be there for families when they're not feeling it,
Yes. And we see that all the time. Even with families, like, a family, their own biological family, not understanding, like, an adoptive mom's own mom and dad don't see and are not able to grasp the adoption in the same way. And so you've got this mom and this dad who are out here in this really hard spot, trying to attach, trying to work on bringing the unity to their family. And they've got other family that they've relied on for their entire lives that now don't understand. And it can be very isolating. It can be very lonely. And we at Grace Haven, it's our passion and our mission to make sure that families are not alone. There's so much help out there. There are so many counseling places that you can get a child into that provide help for a child, and we want to do those things too. But there are so very few places where a mom and a dad can turn for help and support. And that's where we hope to encompass a family as a whole and look at it as a whole unit, and really support the entire unit and not just the child, because I think that's where part of that myth comes into, oh, well, if a child is adopted, then they need help. No, if a child is adopted, the entire family needs help. It's not just there's a problem with the child or there's a solution that can be found only with the child. Everybody needs help, and everybody needs that shoulder when that adoption has taken place.
Yes. Well, and Grace Haven became a thing for us last fall. And again, you had been a support for me. You had been that person that I could text and just say, I don't know what is going on in this child's head, but I feel like I'm going crazy. And I had sent so many SOS texts to you at that point, but I think even you knew that this one was different. And it was after Clark had run away for the umpteenth time and thrown things and whatever else. And I texted you, Annie, I cannot do this anymore. And we've talked about Rebecca, and she is the director of counseling services at Grace Haven. And at this point, I knew that Grace Haven was a Facebook group, but I didn't know a lot about it. I didn't realize how extensive the support was. And you texted me back, Rebecca will be at your house today. And she was there an hour later. And so, I mean, Grace Haven changed the story of our adoption. And obviously we owe that to God, but we owe that, he used you specifically to help us with that and to get us to where we are now. And so we're so grateful for that. But I want to make sure that everyone listening understands that is absolutely accessible to them as well.
Absolutely. We are 4 families local here in Northwest Arkansas. We will come to you. We will meet with you. Whatever services we can provide, whether it's mom needs a shoulder, and that can be mine, that could be Tina's, that could be Rebecca's, that could be Angie's, or whether it is a dad who needs some support and just needs some uplifting, because Waylon and Randy would be more than happy to reach out and do that. Or, if you need us to come in and just be at your house and be that supportive person, having a counselor there, being able to help you navigate some of those difficult things, whatever we can do. If you are not local to Northwest Arkansas, but you need us, we are absolutely still there for you, whether you find us on Facebook or reach out to us with a phone call. We will do what we can to walk with you through it over the phone, to answer questions in an email. I mean, whatever we can do to help get you resources in your area. I've had families call from Oklahoma City, from different cities in Texas. I've talked to families in Michigan. I mean, all over the country, who will call, and we do our best to be, number one, listeners, but then find resources for them in their area, whether it's trauma-based counselors, whatever we can do to help. We've had people reach out for us asking for help finding an inpatient hospital for their child, and we've done that too. Whatever we can do to help the family find the resources that they are currently seeking, we're going to do, and just be there however we can for any family that has adopted. Yes.
And I mean, that's our story as well. Clark is currently not living in our house, and that's, I say that's thanks to you, and I don't mean that in a sarcastic way, but I just mean it took a long time for us to realize that there were options, and you were the one that pointed us in that direction. And I mean, we're eternally grateful to you. But I think that such an important key to this story is just how you turned, now you're doing this, professionally, I guess we could say, but this started with you just doing this because you because you did, because that's just what you did. And I look at you and I think, how does this woman have any more bandwidth? And you just keep getting more somehow.
Well, I do. I mean, I think my husband, he is wholly supportive of me. I started this before my professional career. I was actually first a workers' compensation adjuster for Walmart, working within different states, handling work comp claims, and I'm very customer service oriented. And that was very much like a social work position. You talk to the person who was injured, find out what they need, get them the treatment they need, and close their claim, and so it was very social work, but also customer service oriented. And I left my job. I became a manager. I had worked my way up. I worked there for many years and then left my job kind of abruptly, and wasn't really expecting to leave my job, but just had some negative feedback when we started expanding our family, and I missed some time from work and just really had kind of a struggle with all the time that I had put it in, and then having to miss and having to try to find that work-life balance, which is really difficult. And in that struggle, I decided to just stay home and see if we could make it. And we weren't really expecting that, but I just made a decision, and my husband supported me 100%. And when I came home, I was bored out of my mind. I needed somebody to talk to. And so when DHS came in and did like a brief, just like the area office came and did like a quarterly review of my home, they brought in the area director, which was super strange, but she wanted to come into some of the homes with 8 kids and see how they were doing. And so they brought her to my house, and as I was visiting with her, I suggested that they find mentors for new foster parents, because I felt like that was so important. And I told them that if they ever had any foster parents that needed it, that I would always be available for questions and just talked with them. And at the time, they said, hey, there's this new organization called The Call. You should call them and see what happens. And so I sort of fell in line because of my passion to help others. When we had struggled through that first 2 years as a foster parent and had kind of then down our stride of, this is what court looks like, and this is what. And so I feel like it really has come natural to me from the beginning, from my way back when I did workers' compensation claims, to wanting to just mentor foster parents so they didn't fall into this sticky trap of not understanding the court processes and not understanding who played what role, all the way to now where I am in wanting to make sure that adoptive families have 100% support. And I truly do. I owe that to my husband and, my kids. Even tonight, I was doing some work for our upcoming adoptive moms retreat that we're having for Grace Haven. And one of my daughters said, hey, Mom, can I use the iPad? And I said, oh, I'm working on it right now. And I could see her disappointment. And I kind of just brought her in and I said, I'm working. And a lot of times Mom doesn't work in the evenings when you're awake, because I like to spend my time with you. But tonight I really need this time. And I can see that disappoints you. So we can maybe schedule some time tomorrow. And I could see her heart kind of uplift. But, I try to really spend a lot of time when my kids are awake and with me on them. And they don't even necessarily know, unless I'm taking a crazy phone call or something, that there's even
happens.
anything. Right, it does. But they don't even realize that there's crazy going on in the background. A lot of times I work a lot of times after they've gone to bed, and then before they wake up, and during the day while they're gone, to try to get as much done as I can and to help and support families as much as I can in that time, so that I can spend a lot of quality time with them in those few short hours that we have between the time they get home from school. I said few short, they seem long some days.
Isn't that the truth?
the time they get home from school to the time that we go to bed, I really try to focus on them. And if it wasn't for their flexibility and Waylon's flexibility and support and just, he sees my vision. If I say something crazy like, man, I think we should tie a purple balloon to our house and see if it floats, he's like, okay, I'm in.
Good guy, that Waylon.
He always just seems to support me. So
yeah. Okay, so what would you say to that mom who's exactly what we described? She's feeling really lonely because people keep giving her praise that she doesn't feel like she deserves, and she doesn't necessarily want to hide how she really feels, but she feels forced to because of that pedestal that she's on, and she doesn't feel like she even can be transparent. What do you think is the first step to climbing out of that darkness?
Well, I think the first step, it's twofold. Number one, if she doesn't feel like she can be transparent anywhere, she needs to call me because I am 100% going to say, I feel like God just speaks life into me sometimes. And so when I'm talking to these moms, I can say, what are you feeling? And I can get them to really open up to me. And so if she can't talk to others, please call me. I am available 24 hours a day. I do not turn my phone off at night. I've answered phone calls at 2:00 in the morning from moms that were in distress and had kids running away or had something happen, and I want to be there. So that is, besides taking care of my family and having this beautiful, crazy chaos of a life, my passion is helping moms. And so if she can call me. And I think if not, really, really turning within to find out why she doesn't think she can be transparent, but even not as much why, but there's got to be one person. Is it your pastor's wife? Is it your mom? Is it your grandma, your great aunt, your best friend from college? There's got to be somebody that you trust with your whole heart that you can talk to, because I think that is the first step, being able to find one person. And once you've got one person that you truly feel confident in talking to, it makes that story easier. And I mean, it's never easy to say, my 15-year-old child sexually abused one of my other children, but sometimes you have to say those words, and being able to say those words, talk to somebody and get, just even a hug. Nobody's going to have all of the answers for you. I'm not going to have all the answers if you call me, but I will always have a listening shoulder. I meet people for coffee. I have breakfast. I share in their joy when it's crazy to think that finding an inpatient hospital for your child can be a joyful time, because it's also very sorrowful. Your child's no longer living with you. We have one child right now in inpatient hospitalization, and it is hard, but there is also joy there, because you see that you are not crazy. You are not making these things up, that somebody else, a doctor, right, a counselor, can see that your child needs this treatment too. And so even in that brokenness of that situation, there is also great relief and great happiness that finally I may be able to get some answers. What if this is what leads us to the end of this child finally being able to be a productive member of society when they're 25, 30, 35. And those are the moments that I want to be there and help the moms rejoice in those moments, help them through those hard moments and, be able to just, even if they just need me to walk the walk. I know we talked about earlier when Hannah made a report to DHS, and DHS came into our home to do an investigation. And I called messaged out to Tina and Rebecca and just said, this horrible thing has happened. And they were at my house within the hour.
That's amazing.
Just solidarity and there wasn't anything they can do. You can't stop something like that when it happens. And I really didn't want to. I wanted this to go through, and I wanted DHS to be able to look at it and say there was nothing there. And, to be able to say, look, there was nothing. But at the same time, knowing that I had people there that would just come, that would just sit and just be with us it's life altering to know that there are people out there. And that's what Grace Haven is. That's what I am. And that's who I want to be for any adoptive mom that's struggling, any adoptive dad that's struggling, any family that needs us. We want to be there for them.
Yeah. Oh, such good stuff, Annie. So, and honestly, I mean, just back to that figurative mom that we were talking about, I think that outside of this conversation, we've talked about Grace Haven being, being multiplied into different areas and states. And I think that starts with moms who are scared to be transparent, who are scared to tell people what's really going on, and getting to the point where they can educate people on what it's really like, because just because it's hard doesn't mean that it's not worth it. Doesn't mean that you should quit or that people shouldn't try. And I think that's a grieving process and a learning process for every adoptive family. But anyway, so on that note, I kind of have some just final questions that I ask all my guests. So are you ready for that?
Yes.
Cool. So, okay. At the beginning of this journey, what do you wish that someone had just looked you in the eye and made you believe them when they told you what?
I wish truly that that somebody would have said, take a vacation with your spouse before you start this. And I don't even think that necessarily applies only to adoption, but to having kids in general, because it does change your life so much. And Waylon and I were so wrapped up in our loss of fertility or not being successful in having a baby biologically, and that grief that belongs with that we weren't even thinking about going and doing something just for us. We just dove straight on in. And I really do, I miss time alone with my husband. And I don't think that you ever get that back until they're grown, and maybe not even then.
Oh, true that. Okay, so that's a good one. It makes a lot of sense, but I haven't had any guests say that yet, so that's awesome. All right, so what is something that you wish you had done differently, aside from not taking a vacation with your husband?
Yeah. For me, we have this beautiful family, and it pains me to say this because I don't ever want any of my children to think that they are not loved, because they are such great treasures. But we got these kiddos when they were young. We adopted Gavin when he was 8, and Hannah was 6, and Tevin was 4. And then almost immediately got Chloe, who was 5, and the twins who were they had just turned 1, just after adoption. And they were so close in age, and I really didn't think about that impact. Like, people would sometimes say, like, one of these days they're all going to be teenagers. And we would laugh and say, yes, they will, and everything will be fine. We'll have had them for 10 years by then. By the time they start turning into teenagers, it's going to be okay. And like life has hit us so hard. We have had just, I can't even describe the roller coasters over the last few years as our kids have become teenagers, as they've developed hormones, as they've gone through those grieving processes, because when they do develop those hormones and they are crazy, raging teenager hormones, they also grieve a lot of those losses again, where they lost biological family, where they don't understand how they don't know who their biological dad is. Maybe they know who mom is. There are lots of losses and lots of griefs that they go through. And I really, really wish that we had just maybe taken a breather after we adopted our first sibling group, and not adopted, or not maybe taking kids quite so close in age, because they have put us through the ringer. And I love them each dearly. And I know that this time that I am putting in now, I pray every day that it is going to grow some fruit, and that, and I see it. There are moments that my 15-year-old daughter will come and just give me a hug and be like, "Mommy, I love you." And those moments just melt my heart, because I'm like, thank you, Jesus. She doesn't say she hates me today.
Which is a real thing, not just for you, but that's not uncommon.
She says I hate you way more than she says I love you, I think. And I do think that is not uncommon, for any teenager, much less teenagers who've been through trauma. So I think having so many teenagers this close together, when they were younger, I felt like, we can get through this. And now I'm like, please tell me when this is over, maybe I'll open my eyes again.
Oh, goodness. That's awesome. Okay. Well, good stuff. Good stuff. All right. So what is your favorite way that your tribe supported you? And I feel like we've talked about this question just within it, but maybe if you could nutshell it for us. What's your favorite way that your tribe has supported you? And also, what is a way that maybe you felt hurt or not supported despite good intentions, or not good intentions, just whatever?
Oh, well, I feel like, from just always, our needs are always met. People who have come to us and helped provide, on multiple occasions. We've had kids for so many years now, but just come out and provide Christmas. We took two little boys one year, 2 days before Christmas, and just had, I just put out on Facebook, well, we got 2 new additions. I'm not sure how we're going to do Christmas, but we're going to make it work. And within hours, there were people flooding my house with gifts, with gift cards, with, everything to make sure that those boys had a Christmas equal to no other.
Wow.
And, I feel like those are those amazing support things that happen where people just see a need and they just fill it. 1 year, I can't remember even what year or what it exactly looked like, and I still to this day have no idea. But Gavin was about maybe 10, so 6 or maybe even 7 years ago, answered the front door because I was holding babies, and it was almost
As
Christmas. You're right, holding lots of babies, and it was almost Christmas, and the person at the door said, "Are you a Martin?" And Gavin said, "Yes," and he said, "Great, this is for your family." And Gavin said, "Okay, let me get my mom," and he said, "No need." And was gone, immediately gone, before I could even put the babies down and get to the front door. And there was an envelope with $1,000 in it. Just
whoa,
10 $100 bills in an envelope for our family. And I still to this day don't know. Another family on the same day, a few hours later, was blessed in the exact same way. And so I know that it was very, something that was very planned. I have no idea where that came from, but those moments where, a few years ago, Grace Point Church came out, and it was last year actually, came out and did a bunch of landscaping and put a trampoline in our backyard to, Ozark Missions Project, who came in and built some cabinets for us and put cabinets in our house, and sent a team to spend about 3 days here just doing little projects that Waylon and I hadn't had time to get to because we have 8 kids. There are just organizations out there that hear about families that foster and families that adopt and have just poured into us. I mean, I could probably make a list and tearfully tell you about each and every one of those things, but those moments, people who've sent us pizza, oh my goodness, you are on that list. I've had people call and say, I hear you're having a rough day, or I know something terrible has happened. Can I send pizza? And when you send pizza to my house, it's not like a normal house. Like, like you don't just get to send 2 pizzas and you feed the
you're like, that's cute.
I'm like, 2 pizzas. My kids will eat that for an appetizer. And so, to send my family pizza and just let us know that you're thinking about us is absolutely, like, it knocks my socks off. Those are the things that just bring me to my knees, and I just thank God for people who understand and who love us enough to make those things happen.
Right. And so, I mean, the main, like, a big theme of what I'm hearing is practical stuff. And I know that just from personal experience, but there's different kinds of practical help. There's like actual physical needs being met, but then there's practical help in just ash heaping with someone, just sitting with them in their pain or in their struggle, and knowing that you don't necessarily have to fix it, but that your presence just makes them feel less alone in it. And that's so, so, so important.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that is so important, because if you hit those trials and tribulations alone and you don't feel that connectedness, I think that's when it becomes isolating, and that's when the enemy will always attack, because we say, there's nobody here. Does nobody care? And you start to second guess. It's that little voice in your head. So I'm just always so blessed and, humbled by people who will notice that our family is large, notice that, like right now, for instance, Waylon and I do not have a salary through Grace Haven. We are purely volunteers on a full-time basis. And people who see that and say, oh my gosh, let me help. I had a friend who brought some cleaning supplies a few weeks ago, and you wouldn't think a bottle of Windex and some tissues could make somebody cry, but they can.
From personal experience, you know this.
From personal experience. So, it's not necessarily the size of the gift as much as just knowing that we are not alone. I think that's huge. And, having that support. I think in the alternative, you asked, when have you been hurt, or, something that's happened. And I think, that right there, like to my core, the hard part of that is being hurt it's so easy when you are internalizing everything to be hurt by nothing, if that makes any sense. Well,
and that's why I ask that, because I want, it's not to be mean at all, but the people listening, I feel like there are a lot of good intentions out there, but there are ways that you hurt. I mean, so on the episode with Kelly Crow, we talked about people saying things like, oh, you're so cute, I could just take you home with me. And people don't realize that is not helpful, and
no.
And it's totally great intentions. All they're saying is you're so cute, but they don't realize that what your kid hears is like, oh, maybe I get a new mommy today. Who knows? Like, it's just all up in the air. And so it's things like that I feel like support systems want to know this. They want to know what they're doing that might potentially have an opposite effect of what they want.
Well, I think for me, the biggest thing is, if I have to reschedule, please don't be angry with me. Things come up. There are 8 of these little bitty creatures who need me all the time. And I feel like a flake so much. And I went through a really hard struggle of, I can't even really be a good friend, so I probably shouldn't. And you can fill in the blank. Shouldn't plan to go to the movies with my friends. Shouldn't go to my friend's house and swim in her backyard. Shouldn't, couldn't, wouldn't, because maybe 2 times out of 3, I had to cancel or reschedule because things were always coming up with my kids. And so I think, especially when you're newly adopted, when you've adopted, a sibling group, 2 or 3 kids, a teenager, that's really hard. Those things, there are going to be times that I have to say, I can't come today. And please don't take those things personally, because I think people have, and they've been hurt. And in turn, that's hurt me, because I would never, ever want my absence from something to hurt somebody. But I know that it has. And I know that I have been greatly hurt then by just never being invited again, by being excluded because I'm the one who has to say no 2 times out of 3. And
oh, yeah.
I don't want to say no. I don't want to be the person who says I can't do that. But we went through a huge stretch of time where Waylon and I didn't have a reliable person who could watch our children. And I grew up when I was young. My baby brother was born when I was 9. By the time he was a year, 18 months old, my mom would leave me in charge of him, and she could go do things, and I could watch him, and he didn't get hurt. Like, he was fine, and I babysat. And so, like, I have a 16-year-old and a 15-year-old, but I cannot leave them with my children. They are not mature enough, and, because of their mental illnesses, because of the different struggles that they have, they cannot babysit. And so, that's a real struggle. And they also cannot stay alone. And so there are like parent nights where you can take your kids and drop them off. That's great. But they only take maybe, to 5th or 6th grade. I've got these teenagers too, and nobody wants them.
Yeah. And
nobody understands that they still need a babysitter, that they can't necessarily babysit themselves because they set the house on fire. We've talked about that. So
that's a thing.
It's a thing, and it's a struggle, because I do have to say no sometimes. And it's not that I want to say no. I want to be involved every time I have the chance. But having 8 kids, having kids with special needs, having kids with mental health issues, all of those things really don't allow me to get out there and do every single thing I want to do, and have cost me some friendships, have really hurt me. And, rather than me being able, and that's where I've become transparent, rather than me being able to be transparent back then and say, we're really struggling, and I'm probably not going to be reliable for the next 6 months or whatever while we struggle through this. I just would say, I can't today, sorry, and then wait for them to stop inviting me. And right. I'm not that person anymore, and I'm so glad I'm not. But I think that definitely can be a struggle for some, and probably is where I have received the most hurt as an adoptive mom.
Yeah. So, maybe the good intention is people just think that they're leaving you alone or backing off to give you more space, and they're not seeing that it's not that you want more space. What you need is for them to
help
bend,
find a babysitter.
Right. Or them to bend a little bit so that you don't have to, or so that you don't feel isolated. And I feel like every adoptive family has experienced that, myself included, where there's friends that are just like, oh, you're just so busy. And I'm like, I'm not busy. I just can't leave my house. So why don't you come to me?
Yes, exactly. Please come to me, but do not judge if my floor is messy.
I feel like that should just be a banner over everyone's
exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about so many good practical advice things. So I hesitate to even ask this question, but the question is, what's the biggest piece of advice? If you could just sum it all up into just like one sentence or phrase, advice or encouragement to adoptive mamas, and would it be to just call you, or do you have something else?
I think absolutely just call me, and whether it's me, if they feel comfortable calling me, and please, I am super not scary, so please feel comfortable calling me. But if you don't finding somebody to be transparent with and having somebody you can be truthful with and, and just say, hey, I need no judgment here, but I do not like my kid today. And being able to say those words, and then hopefully you're going to be able to say those words to somebody who turns around and says to you, it's okay. And
or
gives
me
you
either.
Exactly.
Because you said that to me before.
And so I think finding that person, if it's not me, whoever it is in your life that you can truly be honest with, and it could be your spouse. Maybe that's time for you and your spouse to be alone and just say, I don't like my kid today. Or maybe that's, like we talked about, your best friend, your college roommate, somebody. Maybe it's somebody who lives way far away from you, and you can just tell them over the phone, whatever that looks like. Just finding that person that will give a sympathetic ear, I think, is super important.
Awesome. And I mean, so good, Annie. I just am so appreciative that we finally made this work and that you were willing to lend me your time and take it away from your littles. Tell them I'm sorry. But, okay, so speaking of being able to call you or contact you, where can anyone find you on social media or elsewhere? Yes. Well, my phone number, they can call me, 479-633-2288. If they look me up on social media, my name is Annie Martin on Facebook, but they're going to probably want to search my private email address, which is SASELIG@att.net. And or they can email me at annie.martin@gracehavenhome.com. And if they will find me, whether it's, and we have Grace Haven Ministries has a Facebook page from Rogers, Arkansas. If they'll find that Facebook page, they can message the Facebook page. Those messages come to me. They can find me and message me privately. I will, if I don't know who they are, I usually will send a message and say, who are you and what do you want? Because you never know if somebody's just coming like, trolls or whatever. But yeah. If somebody friends me and I don't see that I have friends in common with them and things like that, then I'll usually ask, hey, what's going on? Or what do you, who are you? But I accept all friend requests. I'm pretty much there for anybody, however they want to reach out to me, whether it's phone, text, email, whatever. I am just always available. You're just super accessible, and we thank you for it. We're ever grateful. Okay, so yeah, thanks, Annie. I'm so thankful that you came on the show, and it was just such a good chat. I thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for listening to the Adoptive Mom Podcast. I know this stuff is hard, and I hope you found encouragement here. Remember, you are enough, and you're doing a great job. God wants to be at the center of this journey, and He is big enough to redeem all of our mistakes. Don't forget to check out show notes and other resources at theadoptivemompodcast.com. Thanks again for listening.